Picture your dinner tonight, whatever it is. A bowl of rice, a piece of chicken, something you ordered and pretended you made. Now imagine eating it raw, not undercooked, raw, cold, unprocessed. The way it came out of the ground or off the animal. No heat, no seasoning, no pan, no 20-minute recipe you half followed from a video. If your instinct right now is mild revulsion, that reaction is not just personal preference. That is biology. That is hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary programming telling you, clearly and firmly, that cooked food is not a luxury. It is what food is supposed to be. And the reason your body feels this way, the reason the smell of something cooking can make you hungry from 3 rooms away while the smell of the raw version barely registers, is one of the most consequential stories in the entire history of our species. Because here is what most people don't know. Cooking didn't just change what humans ate, it changed what humans are. It rewired our bodies. It restructured our brains. It reorganized our social lives. And it may be the single development most responsible for the fact that you are sitting here capable of thinking about any of this at all. Start with the assumption, because the assumption is wrong in an interesting way. The conventional story goes something like this. Humans discovered fire. Humans figured out that meat left near fire tasted better. Humans started cooking on purpose. Simple, logical, clean. That story isn't false, but it skips the part that actually matters. The part where cooking didn't just improve the taste of food. The part where cooking physically transformed the human body over hundreds of thousands of years in ways that made going back impossible. We didn't just start cooking because it was convenient. We evolved to require it. Here is what cooking actually does to food and why it changed everything. When you apply heat to raw food, several things happen simultaneously. Tough plant cell walls break down, releasing starches that would otherwise pass through you largely undigested. Proteins unfold and denature, becoming dramatically easier for digestive enzymes to process. Fats render and become accessible. Toxins that many plants produce as natural defenses are neutralized. Parasites and bacteria are killed. The result is not just food that tastes better, it is food that delivers significantly more usable energy per gram than the raw version. Cooked sweet potato delivers roughly 30% more calories than raw sweet potato. Cooked egg protein is digested at about 91% efficiency. Raw egg protein is digested at about 51%. The difference is not cosmetic. It is the difference between being adequately fed and spending your entire waking life trying to consume enough raw food to sustain a large, metabolically expensive brain. Which brings us to the chimpanzee problem. Our closest living relatives spend between 5 and 7 hours every single day chewing, not eating. Chewing. Raw fruit, raw leaves, raw fibrous plant material that requires enormous mechanical processing just to break down enough to swallow. Their entire jaw structure, their massive molars, their powerful chewing muscles are built around this reality. Chewing is a major portion of their waking life because their food requires it. Now look at human teeth. We have the smallest teeth of any gray ape relative to our body size. Our jaws are dramatically weaker. Our digestive tracts are shorter and smaller than you would expect for a primate our size. Every one of these traits points in the same direction. The human body evolved for food that had already been partially processed before it entered the mouth. We evolved for cooked food. Our anatomy is the record of that evolution written in bone and tissue. This is the argument that Richard Wrangham, a Harvard primatologist, spent decades building. His hypothesis, detailed in his 2009 book and supported by substantial evidence in the fossil record, is that cooking was not just something humans eventually figured out to do with fire. Cooking was the trigger for the emergence of anatomically modern humans in the first place. The argument runs like this. When an ancestor of ours, probably Homo erectus roughly 1.8 million years ago, began consistently cooking food, available caloric energy increased dramatically. The gut, no longer required to do the enormous digestive work of processing raw food, could shrink. The energy freed from maintaining a massive digestive system could be redirected toward the brain. The human brain is extraordinarily expensive. It consumes roughly 20% of our total energy budget, despite being only about 2% of our body weight. Building a brain that large and running it continuously requires a food source that delivers reliable, dense, highly accessible calories. Raw food, in the quantities a human could realistically gather and chew in a day, probably cannot sustain it. Cooked food can. In this reading, the expansion of the human brain from roughly 600 cubic centimeters in early Homo to over 1,400 cubic centimeters in modern humans is not just a story about intelligence, it is a story about cooking. The brain grew because the food got better. And the food got better because of fire. So when does the actual evidence begin? The oldest confirmed evidence of controlled fire used by human ancestors comes from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dating to approximately 1 million years ago. Burned plant ash, charred bone, sustained contained fire inside a cave. Deliberate. But controlled fire and intentional cooking are not quite the same claim. The oldest site with strong evidence of systematic food preparation using fire, hearths with animal bones showing consistent heat processing, dates to around 400,000 years ago at Kezim Cave in Israel. By this point, it is not occasional contact between food and flame. It is a practice, a routine. Something the inhabitants of that cave did reliably enough that the archaeological signature is unmistakable. Some researchers argue the body changes in Homo erectus, the shrinking gut, the smaller teeth, the expanding brain, push the likely start of consistent cooking back to nearly 2 million years ago. The physical evidence in the fossil record precedes the fire evidence we found so far, which probably means the fire evidence is incomplete. Organic material burns, ash disperses. Ancient hearths are difficult to identify and easy to miss. The body, preserved in bone, is a more durable record than a fire that went cold 2 million years ago. Here is the piece that almost nobody talks about. Cooking didn't just change human bodies, it changed human time. A chimpanzee spending 6 hours a day chewing has 6 fewer hours for everything else. For making tools, for teaching, for social bonding, for the kind of extended conversation and cooperative activity that builds complex culture. The shift to cooked food effectively gave early humans hours back every single day, hours that could be spent on other things, on the behaviors that made us something more than another primate scrambling for raw calories. The campfire where food was cooked became the first gathering place with a fixed social purpose. People came back to it every evening, reliably. They sat together, they waited for food together, they ate together. The shared meal is so fundamental to human social life across every culture that has ever existed that it barely registers as remarkable. But it is remarkable. No other species does this in the way we do. Eating together, waiting together, the ritual of a shared fire and shared food is distinctly and deeply human. And it started, as far as we can tell, the moment cooking did. The campfire was not just a technology. It was the original dining table, the original living room, the original place where the group came together at the end of the day and became, briefly, more than the sum of its individual members. Cooking created a social architecture that persists unchanged in its essentials right up to this moment. Whatever you eat for dinner tonight, whether you cook it yourself or someone else does, whether it's elaborate or minimal, you will probably eat it with someone or wish you could. That wish is ancient. That pull toward the shared meal, the warmth, the gathering at the end of the day, is not sentiment. It is the echo of hundreds of thousands of years of sitting together around a fire, waiting for food to be ready, and becoming human in the process. When did ancient humans start cooking food? The evidence points to at least 400,000 years ago in any systematic sense, and possibly close to 2 million years ago if you read the fossil record carefully. But the more important answer is this. By the time cooking started, it never stopped, because it couldn't. The body that cooking helped build was a body that required cooked food to function properly. We had crossed a threshold with no return. Every meal prepared with heat is a behavior older than our species as we recognize it. Every kitchen, every fire, every stove, every open flame in every culture across all of human history is an unbroken chain running back to an ancestor crouched over embers with a piece of meat, noticing that something had changed, something that would change everything else. What about you? Could you go a week eating only raw food? Let me know in the comments. Until then, see you soon.